Right, let's go back to the news that globally we've seen more than 1 million deaths in this pandemic. Jennifer Dowd is Associate Professor of Demography and Population Health at the University of Oxford. Hello to you, Professor Dowd. How significant is this milestone?
It's an extremely sobering milestone. I don't think any of us would have expected this back in February if we were to make projections. And there's this saying that one death is a tragedy, but 1 million are a statistic. And I just really hope we can all not become numb to such huge numbers and really remember that all of these deaths represent a family member or a friend. And so the grief of these deaths is really multiplied many times over.
And initially, when we look back, of course, there were many comparisons made with flu at the time, weren't there? How do you reflect on that, knowing what we know now?
We've already seen many more global deaths than we typically expect in a bad flu season. And so there's no doubt that COVID is worse than the flu. We did hope very early on that we might learn that this was not as severe as we feared. But we have one method of trying to calculate the real death toll is looking at what we call excess mortality, where instead of counting official COVID deaths, we look at the overall deaths and compare that to a baseline from previous years. And this is kind of trying to do that counterfactual of what would the world look like if 2020 had not seen COVID. And from that excess mortality, we see that the actual deaths have been, in many countries, even 20 or 40% higher than official COVID deaths and much higher than typical years. So unfortunately, we probably actually passed this 1 million milestone even many weeks ago.
Can I ask you why you think, if we believe the mortality figures, that countries in parts of Africa, for example, lower income countries, are faring relatively well?
Yeah, I think it's a very complex question with not one easy answer. One thing is, I think international seeding and travel were very important early in the pandemic to sort of seeding these hotspots like London and Milan, for example. And there's not as much international travel to those countries. But I think they also have excellent public health infrastructure to deal with infectious diseases because of things like tuberculosis and Ebola. And so they actually are really well practiced at dealing with these outbreaks and have that infrastructure. And a third factor really might be the young age structure. We know demographically that mortality is highly concentrated at older ages, and Africa and many lower income countries are extremely young in their age structure. So that might have been protective in this instance.
Thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you.